Welcome, curious minds. Every single day, we're faced with decisions. From the seemingly trivial, like what to have for lunch, to the really significant ones about careers or family, right? We're constantly sort of negotiating internally, weighing those immediate, tempting benefits against the, well, often delayed, sometimes hidden, longer-term consequences. It's a skill we learn almost without thinking. But what happens when those decisions aren't just for us, but they scale up to national policy? Suddenly, things get way more complicated. And what's really amazing is how often these basic common sense truths we use every day just, poof, seem to get ignored when we talk about public economics. This is the deep dive. We take a whole stack of sources, articles, research, maybe even your notes, and we dig in to pull out the really important nuggets of knowledge. Our mission today, to give you a shortcut, a way to get well-informed on a topic that's, let's be honest, confused people for centuries. We'll use surprising facts, maybe a little humor, and insights that might just change how you see things.
Yeah, today we're diving into a real classic, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. It's amazing, written back in 1936, but still incredibly relevant. Hazlitt basically argues that almost all the mistakes we make in economic thinking, these fallacies, they stem from one single critical oversight. So our goal for you listening in is to really unpack this fundamental lesson, understand it, and then show you how it applies to so many economic discussions, even the ones happening right now. It's more than just a book. It's like a lens for seeing the economic world more clearly.
And it's funny, but once you get his core idea, it seems so simple, but it's really powerful. Hazlitt boils it down beautifully. He says the art of economics is about looking not just at the immediate effects of something, a policy or an action, but at the longer effects. That's key. And just as important, tracing the consequences not just for one group, which is often the easiest thing to do, politically speaking, but for all groups, everyone. It's really about developing the discipline to see beyond the obvious, to see the whole picture.
Okay, let's peel back that first layer then. Unveil this single lesson. Hazlitt doesn't mess around. Right at the start, he says economics is haunted by more fallacies than any other study known to man. Bold statement. And he thinks there are solid reasons for this. Why are we so prone to getting economics wrong? He points to two main things. First, what he calls the special pleading of selfish interests. Makes sense, right? Any group that benefits directly from a policy, even if it hurts others more, well, they're going to argue for it, nonstop. They'll, as Hazlitt puts it, hire the best viable minds to make their case. These aren't just casual chats, they're campaigns. And the goal is either to convince everyone else their self-interest is good for all, or just confuse the issue so much that nobody can think straight about it. It's like an information war.
Yeah, you can definitely see that happening. Powerful lobbies pushing their angle. It gets noisy. What's the second reason then?
The second one is maybe even more common. It's the persistent tendency, as he calls it, to see only the immediate effects of a policy or its effects only on a special group. People just don't ask about the long run or about everyone else. They forget the ripple effects. It's this failure to look at the secondary consequences. It's short-sightedness, basically, both in time and in who you're looking at.
Oh, okay. So that's the core difference he's talking about between good economics and bad. He says this oversight is almost the whole difference. The bad economist stops at what's obvious, what hits you right away. But the good economist, armed with this lesson, looks beyond. They see the direct and the indirect consequences, the long-term ones. And crucially, the bad economist focuses on just one group, maybe the ones shouting the loudest. The good economist asks, what about everyone? What about the people who aren't obvious, the ones not making noise? It's funny thinking about this in our own lives. These ideas, looking at all consequences, considering everyone affected, they feel pretty basic for personal decisions. Like, if you eat a whole bag of candy, yeah, it tastes great now, but you're going to feel awful later, right? Or someone drinking too much knows tomorrow morning is going to be rough. Even someone slacking off knows deep down it leads to trouble eventually. We get these truths intuitively. So why, when we talk about public economics, do we suddenly forget them? Why does society make these choices that seem obviously self-destructive on an individual level?
It's a source of real frustration for Hazlitt. He points out that some well-regarded economists even joke about it, dismissing the long run with lines like, "In the long run, we are all dead." They treat foresight as, a bit silly. But the tragedy, Hazlitt says, is we're already living with the long-run consequences of past bad policies. Today, he writes, really hammering it home, is already the tomorrow which the bad economists yesterday urged us to ignore. The full impact might take years, even decades, but it's baked into the policy from the start. Like a flower is in a seed. It's inevitable, even if hidden at first. He uses a great analogy with algebra to explain these inevitable implications. If type 5 and x plus 12, well, y7 is just inevitable. It follows logically, even if you don't see the 7 written down immediately. Economic policies are the same. They have these unseen but certain consequences. Like saying let's increase credit is also saying let's increase debt. They're linked. Or pushing for higher farm prices inevitably means making food more expensive for city folks. Two sides of the same coin. The hard part, the challenge Hazlitt lays out, is always remembering to look at that other side, the one that's maybe less popular or harder to see, the hidden cost.
Which leads right into that concept he borrowed from William Graham Sumner, the Forgotten Man. That's such a powerful idea. Sumner described this scenario back in the 1880s that still feels relevant. Person A sees person X suffering, A talks to B, and B feel they have to do something, so they propose a law to help X. But here's the thing. The law always dictates what C has to do for X. And C is the forgotten man, the taxpayer. The person who pays the price, bears the burden, but gets ignored in the discussion. Their sacrifice is unseen.
Exactly. C is the person paying higher taxes, or whose money buys less because of inflation, or whose job quietly disappears, all to help the more visible group X. And Hazlitt says the real job of a good economist is to shine a light on C, to make the forgotten man visible, to make sure their contribution, their cost, is part of the equation.
Okay, so we've got the lesson. Look beyond the immediate. See the long term. Consider everyone. Now, let's put it to work. Let's apply it to some classic economic mistakes ones Hazlitt dissects that are still around today. And the simplest, most famous one he uses, inspired by Bastiat, is the broken window. Picture this. Some kid throws a brick, smashes a baker shop window. A crowd gathers. Right, and someone always says it. Well, look on the bright side. At least it's good for the glazier's business. He gets work, makes $50, spends it somewhere else. That money circulates. Sounds kind of plausible, doesn't it? The broken window seems to kickstart this little economic ripple. Makes the kid look like, well, almost helpful in a weird way.
Right, that's the bright side argument. And yeah, the glazier gets $50, he's happy, like an undertaker might be about, well, that's the seen part, the visible gain. But what does the crowd miss? What's not seen? It's the baker's side. He had that $50 saved up. He was planning to buy a new suit with it. Now he has to spend it on the window. So instead of having a window and a suit, he just ends up back where he started, with a window and the tailor, the one who would have gotten the $50 for the suit. He's lost that business, so no new job was created. It was just diverted from the tailor to the glazier. The community overall is poorer by one suit that never got made.
Ah, okay. The crowd saw the glazier working, but they didn't see the tailor not working because his potential job vanished. It's that unseen opportunity cost.
Exactly. And Hazlitt says this broken window fallacy is incredibly persistent. It shows up under 100 disguises. We still see it all the time, often applied to much bigger things. Think about rebuilding after a war, like Hazlitt wrote about, or even huge government spending after natural disasters today. People look at the devastation cities flattened, infrastructure destroyed, and they talk about the miracle of production needed for rebuilding, or this pent-up demand. They add up all the costs of replacement and claim somehow that destruction is good for the economy, creates jobs.
Which, following the logic, is just the broken window fallacy grown fat beyond recognition, as Hazlitt puts it. It's the same mistake on a massive, tragic scale. We see the rebuilding effort, the construction crews, but we miss what else could have been produced with those resources if the destruction hadn't happened. It's like cheering for a hurricane because it creates work.
Precisely. Destruction definitely creates need. A war-torn country needs way more than an undamaged one. But Hazlitt hits this point hard. Need is not demand. Real economic demand needs purchasing power, not just need. A country can need everything, but if it has no money or productive capacity, it can't stimulate much business. And this is where the money illusion often creeps in. People confuse money itself with wealth. They think printing more money creates more stuff. But if you just print money without producing more goods, the value of each dollar falls. Prices go up, inflation. You might feel richer because your bank account number is bigger, but in terms of what you can actually buy, you might be poorer.
Like getting a 20% raise, but inflation is 30%. You have more dollars, but they buy less stuff. It's a sneaky deception.
Totally. So those miracles of production during wartime, often fueled by inflation, it just shifts demand around, uses up resources, and in real terms, often makes the whole economy poor. The total pie shrinks, even if some slices change size.
Okay, this leads perfectly into another big one. The belief that government spending is the ultimate solution for everything. Unemployment, slow growth,
Just spend more government money, right? We hear it all the time. The problem is not enough private spending, so the government needs to step in and fill the gap, inject demand.
Hazlitt's response is pretty direct here. He basically says, look, everything we get must in some way be paid for. Nothing's free, except maybe sunshine and air. He hammers home that government spending always comes from taxes, either now through direct taxes or later through borrowing that needs repayment or through inflation. And he calls inflation merely a form, and a particularly vicious form, of taxation. Once you see that every government dollar spent is a dollar taken from someone else, the whole idea looks different. Let's use his bridge example. The government decides to build a bridge to provide employment. Great. You see 500 workers on the job, it's visible. Politicians love ribbon cuttings for bridges. But say the bridge costs $1 million. Where does that come from? Taxes. That $1 million is taken from taxpayers who would have spent it on something else. A car, maybe. Home repairs. College tuition, whatever they needed most. So Hazlitt argues, for every public job on that bridge, a private job was destroyed somewhere else. We see the bridge workers.
But we don't see the car that wasn't built, the renovation that didn't happen, the clothes that weren't bought. We don't see the jobs in those industries that never materialized because the money was taken for the bridge.
Exactly. It's a diversion of jobs, not a net creation. More bridge builders mean fewer car makers, fewer retail clerks, fewer home builders. The economy's resources are just shuffled around, and this applies to all sorts of public works. The visible new building or road hides the unseen private projects or purchases that were sacrificed. It's the forgotten man footing the bill again, and it goes deeper. High taxes themselves have a deterrent effect. Hazlitt explains that heavy taxes, especially on corporate profits or higher incomes, discourage people from producing and taking risks. If a company only keeps, say, 60 cents of every extra dollar it earns, but loses the full dollar if a venture fails, well, that changes its calculations, doesn't it?
Yeah, you'd think twice about expanding or trying something new and risky.
Right. Companies become less likely to invest in better machinery or launch that innovative but uncertain product line. People might not even start new businesses. This isn't just abstract. It means fewer new products, slower improvements in efficiency, fewer well-paying jobs created down the line. It's the unseen future prosperity that gets choked off.
And the long-term result, Hazlitt warns, affects everyone. Fewer, more expensive products for consumers, lower real wages because productivity isn't growing as fast. He argues that the very unemployment problem government spending tries to fix can actually be caused or made worse by the high taxes needed to fund that spending. It's a cycle. It's amazing how focusing only on the visible government job hides all these other unseen negative effects.
Okay, let's tackle another really persistent one. Hazlitt calls it one of the most viable of all economic delusions, the belief that machines create unemployment. He sounds almost exasperated, saying this idea has been destroyed 1,000 times, but it has risen 1,000 times out of its own ashes. If it were true, he says, then all technological progress would be bad. We should have stopped at the wheel.
Right. It feels fundamentally wrong. Hazlitt even uses Adam Smith's pin factory example from 1776. One worker with specialized machinery makes 4,800 pins a day, by hand, maybe 20. If the machines killed jobs idea was right, pin making should have seen massive unemployment. But history shows the opposite. Think about the cotton industry after Arkwright's inventions in the 1760s. People freaked out about job losses. But 27 years later, employment had exploded by something like 4,400%.
Incredible numbers, and later economists worried about steam hoists replacing dock workers, but overall employment kept growing. The technocrats in the 1930s brought the fear back during the Depression. It just keeps returning.
And this fallacy is actually behind a lot of union make-work rules, isn't it? Like feather bedding, forcing employers to hire unneeded workers,
Right.
Firemen on diesel trains, or requiring electricians to disassemble and reassemble perfectly good equipment just because it was made elsewhere. These spread-the-work tactics try to create jobs by being inefficient, which obviously raises cost and means less actual productive work gets done overall.
It's a perfect example of a visible benefit for a few, the extra union jobs, hiding the larger unseen cost for everyone else in the form of higher prices and reduced output. Yes, and the real story, Hazlitt insists, is that machines increase production, raise the standard of living, and boost economic welfare for everybody in the long run. Let's go back to that clothing maker. He gets a new machine and needs fewer workers for the same output. That's the visible job loss. But follow the money. First, someone had to make the machine jobs there. Then the manufacturer has extra profit from the efficiency gain. What does he do with it? Maybe he expands, buys more machines, or invests elsewhere, or spends it on himself. Either way, that money goes back into the economy, creating other jobs.
And eventually competition forces the price of the clothes down.
Yeah. Exactly. Cheaper clothes mean consumers can afford more or they have money left over to buy other things. This higher demand often leads to more overall employment in the clothing industry or related sectors, even with higher productivity per worker. The pie gets bigger. Hazlitt really stresses this. Full employment shouldn't be the primary goal. It's a byproduct of maximizing production. He says, production is the end, employment merely the means. Primitive tribes had full employment. Everyone worked constantly just to survive. Dictatorships achieve full employment through force.
So the real goal is producing more stuff, more efficiently. Because, as he says, the problem of distribution is, after all, more easily solved the more there is to distribute. A bigger pie is easier to share.
Now, it is really important, and Hazlitt acknowledges this, to remember the Joe Smith scenario. The skilled worker whose specific job genuinely disappears because of a new machine.
That's a real person facing a real hardship. Their skills might become obsolete overnight. It's a personal tragedy, no doubt.
Absolutely. And Hazlitt says we cannot and must not forget Joe Smith. His situation represents the undeniable human cost that often comes with progress. It's visible, it's painful, but the answer, he argues forcefully, isn't to stop progress. It's not to ban the machine or create inefficient make-work jobs. That just makes everyone poor in the long run. Instead, the focus should be on helping Joe Smith transition, maybe through retraining, unemployment support as a temporary bridge, things like that.
So support the person through the transition, but don't sacrifice the overall long-term benefits of progress for the whole community. It's a tough balance.
It is, but clinging to inefficiency is never the answer. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at interventions around prices, wages, and money itself. Hazlitt argues that the price system is central to how a free economy works. He calls it a quasi-automatic governor. Think of it like a giant, complex signaling system. Demand for something goes up. People offer more. Price rises. That higher price signals profit opportunity to producers, so they make more of it. Demand falls or supply increases. Price drops. That signals less needed here, so resources shift away. It directs capital and labor more effectively than any central planner could.
But governments are always trying to fix or stabilize prices, aren't they?
Well,
Usually claiming they're helping producers or protecting consumers.
They are. Take agriculture. Governments often give loans to farmers to hold crops off the market, trying to create an ever-normal granary to smooth out prices. Sounds nice, but Hazlitt argues this job is already done better by, well, speculators. Those much reviled speculators, by trying to profit from future price changes, actually help stabilize prices. They buy low, sell high, evening out supply. Government attempts often just create huge, costly surpluses, ever abnormal granaries that distort the market for years and waste resources. Like storing mountains of butter nobody wants at that price. Then there's the other side. Maximum price controls. Trying to keep prices of necessities, bread, milk, rent below their market level. This always backfires, Hazlitt says, in two ways. First, the low price makes people want more of it. Demand goes up. Second, the low price makes it less profitable or even unprofitable to produce or supply it. So supply goes down.
More demand, less supply. That means shortages, right? For the very thing they wanted to make abundant.
Exactly. It's a classic unintended consequence. And to deal with the shortages they created, governments then have to resort to rationing or subsidies to producers, paid by taxpayers, of course. Eventually, it can lead down a path to controlling everything: wages, materials, production quotas. A completely regimented economy, as Hazlitt calls it. Black markets pop up, efficiency tanks, and individual liberty shrinks. Because controlling what people earn or spend eventually means controlling people. Now, let's apply this to wages. Hazlitt argues a wage is just a price, the price of labor. So trying to force wages up through minimum wage laws has similar negative effects to other price controls. We often don't think of it that way because we call it wages, not the price of labor, but the economic logic is the same.
Okay, so if you set a minimum wage higher than what some workers' skills are worth to an employer,
Then those workers simply won't get hired. Hazlitt puts it bluntly. You can't make a person worth a certain amount just by making it illegal to pay them less. What you actually do is prevent them from earning what they could earn, maybe a lower wage, but still something. Society loses their contribution, and they lose the job. So, minimum wage substitutes unemployment for low wages, often hitting the least skilled, youngest, or most marginalized workers the hardest. He does acknowledge that unions can be useful. They can help workers figure out their market value, level the playing field in negotiations with big employers. But, he warns, when unions use coercion, like restricting membership to keep supply low, or using strikes to force wages far above productivity levels, they essentially create a privileged group. They benefit their members, sure, but often at the expense of other workers who are shut out or consumers who pay higher prices. Fundamentally, Hazlitt argues, wages are determined by labor productivity, the huge rise in living standards and real wages over the past century or two. That's overwhelmingly thanks to capital accumulation, better tools, technology, and innovation, not primarily because of union demands or minimum wage laws.
So those union gains might be visible for their members, but the unseen costs are borne by others, non-union workers, consumers paying more. In the long run, trying to push wages up without boosting productivity just makes things more expensive and can actually lower real wages for everyone by hurting the overall economy. Another case of the seen versus the unseen.
Right. And this brings us to maybe the biggest illusion, inflation and the related assault on saving. Hazlitt stresses the danger of confusing money with actual wealth. Real wealth isn't just slips of paper or numbers in an account, it's the actual stuff. Food, houses, cars, factories, roads, the things we produce and consume. Sure, if you individually get more money, you can buy more. But if the whole nation just gets more money printed, we can't all buy twice as much unless twice as much stuff is actually produced. Inflation happens when the money supply grows faster than the supply of goods and services, often because the government prints money or borrows heavily. And crucially, Hazlitt points out, it doesn't raise all prices evenly or at the same time. That's key. The first people to get the new money may be government contractors or people getting stimulus checks. They benefit. They spend it before prices have fully adjusted upwards, but the people who get the money last, or those on fixed incomes like pensioners, they lose out. Prices have already gone up by the time the money reaches them, or their income doesn't rise at all. Their purchasing power shrinks.
So inflation acts like this, a veil of illusion, as Hazlitt calls it. It confuses almost everyone. We see our wages go up in dollar terms and feel richer, even if prices have gone up more. He compares it to an anesthetic that dulls the pain of bad policy. It makes destructive things feel okay in the short term because the cost is spread out and disguised by rising numbers. A real mirage.
And that's exactly why governments resort to it, Hazlitt argues, especially for things like public works funded by deficits or printing money. It creates the illusion of getting something for nothing. The immediate tax burden isn't obvious, but the borrowing has to be repaid later, meaning higher future taxes, or it leads to inflation. And inflation, he repeats, is a vicious tax. It hits savers, people on fixed incomes, the poor hardest. It discourages saving, encourages spending and speculation, and ultimately erodes trust in the currency itself, which can lead to economic chaos.
This connects to his defense of saving. Common sense tells us saving is good, right? Thrift, prudence. But Hazlitt notes there are always theorists claiming saving is bad, that spending is what drives the economy. He uses Bastiat's story of two brothers, Alvin the spender and Benjamin the saver. Alvin blows his inheritance on luxuries parties, fancy stuff. He looks like he's stimulating the economy, providing visible jobs in those luxury industries.
While Benjamin lives simply, saves his money. He looks like he's hoarding it, not helping anyone immediately. But Hazlitt makes a critical point. Saving, in a modern economy, is only another form of spending. Saved money doesn't just sit under a mattress. It gets deposited in banks, which lend it out. Or it's invested directly in building houses, factories, buying machinery, funding startups. This investment spending creates jobs just as surely as Alvin's luxury spending. The jobs building a factory or developing software are just as real as the jobs serving champagne at Alvin's party. They're just less visible, maybe, and more focused on future production. And over time, Benjamin's saving and investment builds real wealth for society. More factories mean more production. Better tools mean higher productivity. The idea that savings can just sit there, unused, causing stagnation. Hazlitt calls that a fallacy. Banks want to lend deposits. Interest rates naturally balance the supply of savings with the demand for investment capital. Trying to force interest rates artificially low, a common government policy, actually messes things up. It discourages real saving and encourages wasteful or unsustainable investment, leading to booms and busts.
And the big takeaway here is that there's basically no assignable limit to how much new capital a society can productively use. We always need better tools, more infrastructure, new technologies. This accumulated capital is what makes us wealthier than past generations. It's what allows workers to be more productive and earn higher real wages. Think about industries with high wages. Often they have huge amounts of capital investment per worker. That's the engine of prosperity. It comes from saving and investment, the unseen foundation. #outro.
So, yeah, we've really come full circle, haven't we? Back to that core lesson. Economics, when done right, is about seeing those secondary consequences, the ripple effects. And it's about seeing the general consequences, how policies affect everyone in the long run, not just one group right now. Applying that single lesson clears up so much confusion.
It really does. And like Hazlitt says, depth in economics brings men back to common sense.
Once you see the whole picture, it feels kind of absurd to argue that breaking windows is good, or machines cause lasting unemployment, or spending recklessly makes us rich. Yet, people reach those conclusions all the time just by focusing on the immediate, the visible, the benefit to one group. We need that discipline to look deeper.
The real challenge, the difficulty, is that progress often does have short-term costs for some specific people or groups, even while benefiting everyone else overall. It's hard to deny a tariff helps the protected industry right now, or a new machine displaces those specific workers. The Joe Smiths are real, but the solution, Hazlitt insists, is never to block progress, never to artificially prop up inefficiency, reduce supply, or prevent invention.
Because that whole approach leads to trying to create wealth through scarcity, which might work for one tiny group temporarily, but if everyone did it, economic suicide. Less for everyone. It's a doctrine that's always publicly false. So the ultimate goal of economic thinking, Hazlitt tells us, is to see the problem as a whole and not in fragments. It's this constant effort to look past the obvious, understand the full web of effects. So the next time you hear a simple fix proposed for a complex economic issue, jobs, inflation, whatever, just pause. Ask yourself, who's the forgotten man here? What are the unseen consequences down the road?
That's the question we all need to keep asking, applying this timeless lesson. And, if you're interested in exploring more about the nature of money, particularly in our digital age, you might find some interesting perspectives over at bitcoinbytes.org. That's bitcoinbytes.org. Worth a look. This has been another deep dive.